To power on the system, you first power on the mixer and the rack. That's all controlled by this single switch here. You power on the mixer and the rack first and allow it to boot up before you turn on the power amps. Reason being is that you don't want any unwanted pops to get to the speakers. To power on the speakers, you flip these two switches into the up-on position. There's red tape over the top switch because you don't want to touch them. If you happen to see a light underneath the red tape, you'll notice that the amp is now off even though the power switch is on. What that does is it enables an external control to power on and off the system. So therefore it's in standby mode. So if that light is on, reach under the tape, turn that off. But you should never have to do that unless you see a light underneath the red tape. But now you know the system is on because of the green lights.
Okay.
This is the mic input patch bay where you hook up all your microphones when you have an event within the hangar that requires a wired microphone. Only microphones 1 through 12 are currently wired into the board. If anything is plugged into 13 through 24, nothing will happen because it's not connected to the 24 channel. Even though it's a 24 channel board, the other channels are being used for the wireless system and for some other line-in inputs such as CD or DVD players. There are two mixes that you can use for monitoring purposes. They require a passive speaker because they have amplifiers associated with these outputs. Mix 1 is the top channel. Mix 2 is the bottom. So to hook a speaker into the mix 1, insert the channel. All right, this is the Allen & Heath QE24 digital mixing board. And what that means is that there's analog input, but all the internal processing is digital. Because of that and how the board is laid out, it's a 24-channel input along with 3 stereo inputs, along with 4 mix sends, 4 effects sends, and also we'll get into the different effects that are inherent within the board. And that's the main thing. There are different layers associated with this board, and you have to be very conscious of what layer you're looking at in order to do an appropriate mix. For instance, all the channels that you have 1 through 24 are the first 12 channels that were up front in terms of the wired analog inputs. So anything you plug into the black patch bay up front will appear here on this layer, and this is the button to select this layer. Channels 13 through 16 are your wireless channels. Channel 13 is for the white handheld microphone. Channel 14 is for the red handheld microphone. Channel 15 is for the blue body pack wireless. Channel 16 is for the yellow wireless microphone. Channel 19 and 20 is for when you want to play a CD. Notice that I'm only moving one of the faders, but they are paired together. So if you feel something strange when you try to push them up, that means you should only attach one because it's a stereo input from the CD player. And so anything you do will be impacting both channels. Same with the DVD input, left and right. Same with the input from the Mac computer over at the other end of the, what is this called? The booth. The other end of the booth. The other layer associated with this, and this is the button to control that. If you notice, right now, these lights are on in terms of channels 1 through 24. This layer is for your stereo returns, your effects returns, your group masters, and we don't really use those right now, your effects master sends, and these are all the masters for your effects, for your mixes, and for these other mix and matrices that we haven't hooked up and aren't using at this time. One of the stereo inputs that we do use is stereo input 3. That is the iPad or iPod connection. It's a stereo mini plug that all you have to do, notice it's labeled stereo in. You can plug it in right there. So there are some other layers that we're going to discuss, and these are controlled through these buttons here. So first thing I'm going to do is go back to the main channels in terms of the wired inputs and the wireless inputs and the CDs, Macs, and DVDs. If you select the mix 1, all these inputs is what's being sent to mix 1. And that's the monitor speaker, powered monitor speaker. Mix 2 is the second powered amplifier that feeds a unpowered speaker. Sorry. Mix 3 and 4 are not. Mix 3 is not used at this time. Mix 4 is what's being sent to your subwoofer, and that's important to note that it's a separate feed because you don't want a vocalist or some other guitarist or something else feeding your subwoofer. However, you do want something such as a bass guitar or a keyboard or your stereo inputs or even your iPad to feed your subwoofer. Mix 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are not used at this time. Effects 1 selects what's being fed to effects 1. Effects 2, 3, and 4, group 1 and 2 and group 3 and 4 we don't use at this time. So the only selections or layers that you need to be concerned with are the following. The main layer for the 24 channels. The other layer which controls the stereo inputs and your effects returns along with your effects masters and your mix masters. Also mix 1, which is your monitor 1, mix 2, which is your monitor 2, and mix 4, which is your subwoofer. And these FX 1 is currently set for, what is that set for? Hang on a second. FX 1 is currently set to an echo or chamber mid. So that's your reverb mix. FX 2 is currently set for a chorus effect. Effects 3 is currently set for what's called a 2-tap delay. Not many use that. And effects 4 is a flanger or a phaser. So the primary ones that you'll be concerned with right now is mainly just effects 1, which is your reverb for your vocalist. In terms of chorus, sometimes you can add that to an acoustic guitar. But right now, the only one that we're really concerned with is effects 1, and that's your reverb. When you've selected a channel, and how do you select a channel? You select it by selecting the select button. What that does is now these controls come into play. What these controls are your input preamp, and that will adjust the gain of your input, the high pass filter, the parametric EQ, and there are 4 bands with which you can modify your EQ settings. There's an internal gate, an internal compressor, and also pan function. Now, those controls are also, when you select processing, can be accessed here on this touch screen. So if you notice for channel 1, which is what we've selected, the input preamp, if you notice the preamp, is set there. You can adjust it by using this, or you can select it and use this control too. So it's either one.
Okay.
In terms of your gate, the same function. Right now, it's primarily just a threshold. But to adjust any of the other functions, such as depth, attack, and release, and other controls, you have to select it and use this knob to adjust the values.
But if somebody's just using a handheld, they wouldn't really have to do all that.
It depends.
Okay.
Primarily, you don't have to worry about gate. The only thing that you may worry about is your EQ with your 4 bands here and your high pass filter. For instance, with the wireless, you can usually set your speaking high pass filter to around 200 because people's voice don't get that deep.
Okay.
And you don't want it to rumble and have some, for instance, pick up the air conditioning or some other noise in the background that has a low frequency component. But also you will want to get into some of the compression. You need to enable or disable it. Each one of these has an enable or disable function, including the EQ and the high pass filter. And you'll notice on the screen, when you select them, it will tell you if the high pass filter is in, the EQ is in or out, the gate is in or out, and the compression is in or out.
And it just turns green when it's in? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep, and grays out
Okay.
when it's not active. There are some other selection buttons here that control what's visible on the touch screen. One is the processing for whatever selected channel you have. The other is the routing. You really don't have to worry about routing right now because a lot of it's been set up. Mix sends, what you'll notice is that mix 1, 2, and 3 are pre-fader. A pre-fader, because you don't want any changes that you have in the house to affect your monitor mix, because you're going to be mixing and up and down, and that way it keeps the monitor mix constant. Mix 4, however, is post. The reason that is because mix 4 is the subwoofer send.
Okay.
So anything you do in the house and the subwoofer is associated with the house system, you want that relative change to occur when you move the fader up and down. So that's why this says set for post fader for mix 4. The same with the effects. Any change you have to the fader will also change the amount that's going to the effects engine. Audio group assign, we don't use groups, you don't have to worry about that. However, we do have mute groups. And for instance, right now, the wireless channel is selected, and that's assigned to mute group 2,
Okay.
which is also, we'll get into the soft keys, also assigned to the soft key 2.
Okay.
And if you notice, when I select channel 1 is now in a group, mute group 1, along with all 12 of the first channels.
Okay.
No, channels 1 through 12 are part of mute group 1. Mute group 2 are all the wireless devices. And we set that up just for convenience.
Okay.
Especially if there's feedback, you can mute everything, but there's other ways to deal with feedback. Next is home, and that you're able to look at different screens. One, it just tells you about the QU24. User 1, these are the types of users. You won't have to worry about that. Meters is nice because that will show you what's coming into the system. Right now, if you'll see, the only thing that's going active right now is stereo 3, and that's my iPad hooked up to the stereo 3 input. If something else is going on, you'll see the metering going on here. And it's nice to be able to view everything at the same time to make sure your gains are correct. Okay, there's it. So your gain should be set so that it's right around almost into the yellow, because once you get up into the 0 and into the yellow, you still have 18 more dB of headroom, so you don't really have to worry about that. And you don't want it too much of getting into the red, but you do want it up to around the 0 dB mark when you set your input gains. RTA is a real-time analyzer, and what that does is just shows you what frequencies are going on for a specific channel. We don't use that right now. You may use it to ring out the system, because it will show you if you have feedback, it will tell you the frequency that you're feeding back, and then you can use EQ to notch it out. Q drive is a nice function, and we're not going to get into it in this session as it relates to being able to record either the stereo or multi-track, all 16 channels, well, 16 channels in this case, or the stereo output from the left and right onto a USB, which is nice. So if you have an event in here and you'd like to record them from an audio perspective, you can take the main output and pipe it into the USB and record the session that way and play it back later. In this section, in addition to stereo 3 input, is the USB as mentioned. Also your headphone jack. Please leave this here. Don't take it home with you, because it's the adapter for a mini to a 1/4 inch. This is the volume for that, and also I have no idea what that one's for. I highly recommend that you get a pair of headphones, because it helps with making sure what's coming in. You can select an individual channel and actually hear it through the pre-fader listen.
Okay.
When you unselect it, it defaults back to the main out.
Okay.
There are several soft keys. There are actually 1 through 10 that can be assigned to various functions. Various functions such as turn on and off a mute group, recall a specific preset, turn on and off an effects, multiple things that you can do with the press of a button. Do a tap tempo. For instance, you want to be able to sync a delay or some other effect with the beat that's going on. You can actually tap the soft key, and that will set the rhythm for that effect. Right now, what's been set is soft 1 is assigned to muting channels 1 through 12. So if you have a band and then somebody gets up there and speaks, it's nice to be able to mute the band with 1 key. And you notice that the mutes are blinking because mute group 1 is on. And you can turn the channels back on by selecting the soft key. Soft key 2 is associated with the wireless channels. You should never really have to use that, because usually the people using the microphones should turn them on and off, especially the body packs, but sometimes people leave them on, and to reduce feedback you can always mute them with 1 key. Now, one of the most handy ones that we've set up is soft key 10. Soft key 10, go ahead and get the whole board.
Okay.
Soft key 10 is where you should start. When you select soft key 10, it recalls the initial setup of the board,
Okay.
meaning a known state,
Okay.
so that you theoretically everything should work, and all you have to do is bring the faders up and down.
Okay.
So if you noticed, when I had left and right on in all the channels,
Right.
nothing was here.
Yeah.
So, wow, why is something playing right now? And here, right? Nothing in terms of an input. When you go to this layer, this is the input. And it's very important to understand which layer you're in, because sometimes you think, well, I want to turn down the wireless here, but what you're actually doing is turning down the monitor mix
Oh, okay.
instead of bringing down the wireless. because you're up here in this section.
Oh, okay.
Right?
You're
So
in that top
this
layer.
section, which is blue, are all the masters
Okay.
in terms of the master outputs. So you have to be very conscious of where you are and what you're looking at.
Okay.
But primarily you'll be...
this angle because I can't see their blue. There we go.
Yeah. So you have to be very conscious of where you are. Because I'm in mix 1 here,
Okay.
and that controls mix 1.
Okay.
So in addition, so that's the individual channel for mix 1. The master volume for mix 1 is here.
Okay.
And notice that both of these are gained together.
Okay.
That's because when you're in mix 1, this is also the master.
Okay.
You'll see the label, it
Right.
says Body Pack 3.
Right. Right. That was why I was confused. Okay.
Right.
But above it is mixer 1, which is the top layer.
Right.
Okay.
So anything that we label here is primarily the bottom channels.
Okay.
The only exception to that rule is the iPad
Okay.
input
Okay.
or iPod input, which is stereo 3.
Right. So
When you're in here, left, right, that's the main house, left and right.
Okay. The speakers.
Right, the house
Okay.
system,
Okay.
but not the subwoofers.
Okay.
Say I wanted to bring up the volume of my iPad into the house system. I'd select stereo 3. I know that the input is on stereo 3. And you can actually select it. Oh, sorry. I've selected it there just so I could see what's going on in terms of the metering.
Okay.
And take the fader and bring it up. So that brings it up into the house. Mix 4 is the subwoofer. Notice that there's no sound coming out of the subwoofer now. That's because it was assigned as a post-fader send. So anything you do with this fader, say I took the master house down, right? Let's turn that down some. Well, I might need it up. All right.
You hear it kind of rumbling, but grumbling.
Right. So this is to the left and right speakers. Mix 4 is the subwoofer.
Okay.
Actually, that was hotter because it's supposed to fade and we like to keep it hotter. So now I'm with the master house. I just wanted to show you that, even though you make changes here, the subwoofer is still independent. All right, so let's go through setting up a wireless microphone. And we're going to use wireless microphone white, which is this channel here on this layer. So first thing is you have to turn it on. And you'll notice on this frame, and within the little display here, it will show you battery and what channel and everything else. Other important note to note that this white microphone is assigned to this channel here on the wireless receiver. You notice you have two signals because it's a two-signal antenna on the back. So that's when it's on. You notice when I turn it off, the signals go away. So if you're having problems saying why isn't my wireless not getting any volume, the first thing you should check is
Gotcha.
is this on? You know it's on when that's on like that. The other is are you getting gain out of it? When you talk into the microphone, this will be the gain. And so you can see that, yes, it's active there, and I can actually see somebody. And when you first turn it on, you should always check that you have at least a half battery.
Okay.
So now that I've turned the microphone on, you notice I'm getting signal whenever I talk. So I'm going to select that just to see how it's gained here. If you've noticed, it's gained pretty good. You could bring it up a little bit to bring it up into the white. I'm sorry, into the yellow. And if you notice, if you gain it too high, then you're starting to get into the red, which means it's gained way too high. So you want it to be around 0 at the peaks. So all you have to do, if you've started from the common preset to bring it into the house, is to bring up the volume here.
Okay.
Now you're in the house. And that's the volume control for this microphone. Now, when you have a speaker, you'll be challenged. Some people use the microphone correctly by keeping it very close to their mouth. Others who are not experienced hold the microphone down here, which is very challenging. In that case, you'd probably have to gain it up and maybe use compression or a lot of compression, because they'll do a lot of this and it won't be very constant in terms of the volume. So, to use compression, you select it using the top touch screen, and you can turn it on. Right now, we're going to use a soft knee, which is the most common. I usually use a ratio of 3 to 1. Some use 4 to 1. This gain is the offset gain. So if you're compressing, that means you're getting less volume out of it. And so to adapt to that, or to compensate for it, you can increase the gain output of the microphone. The attack you want fairly quick, and the release is, a common setting is around 200 milliseconds. But what you want to do is set the gain. If you notice, by reducing the gain significantly, I'm doing a lot of compression. So I can compensate for that, so that when I turn the compression off, it's about the same level. On, off.
Okay.
So that's what this compensating gain's for. But we're going to reduce, we're going to increase the limit. Oh,
Oop.
sorry.
Feedback.
I need to get my gain back to where it was. Sorry. Yep. So we're only going to be compressing a little bit. So let's change that threshold back to only compressing a little bit. And you want some compression whenever somebody is speaking. Why is that? Oh, that's because if you know. All right. Notice I didn't go back to the threshold and I'm feeding back, is because I'm increasing the gain. So let's put that back to 0. This is good education. Go back to my threshold. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it's just touch screen. You just push
Yeah.
the button.
And change back my threshold back to something that's more reasonable. So if you notice, I'm compressing mainly when I get really loud. And let's compensate that back up to about there.
So your threshold's negative 21, so that's about normal.
Well, it's always based on who the user is, how loud they talk, and what your preamp gain is set at.
Okay.
So you always have those variables.
Okay.
So you can't really say this is the normal
Okay.
threshold used
Okay.
for everybody. The only constant is the amount of compression that you're putting into the top. So you always want a little bit of compression, only if you can make the speech more constant, and so you don't have a wide variation in terms of people who talk, and then they get excited. Right? It's a better experience for the end user. So when you're done with an event and you're about to pack things away, always make sure that your microphones are powered off. You'll know it's powered on because the display will have that LCD information on it. So just make sure it's powered off and then pack them away. All right. So let's go through how to hook up an iPhone, iPad, or anything that outputs using a stereo mini plug. We'll be leaving this cable here, but all you do is plug it into the device. Make sure that the volume is up.
But not all the way. You don't have to
No,
crank it on.
you want it to crank it.
Oh, okay. You do
Yeah.
want to crank it. Okay.
Yeah. For instance, this volume, because you want to stay above the noise threshold on your device.
Okay.
The higher volume you have, this is probably at 90%
Oh,
that I
okay.
usually set it to.
Okay.
When I hooked it up. And the gain for this is set for that.
Okay.
If you've noticed, I'm playing a song, and even though that's all the way up, the gain isn't quite getting into the yellow.
Okay.
So, all you have to do is plug it into your device, make sure the gain on your device is around 90% in terms of settings. Go to your top layer here. Go to the channel that's labeled iPod. Bring up. Oh, hang on. I was back on mix. I was back on mix 1. That was coming through the floor monitor.
Okay.
So that works, as you can tell.
Yes.
So make sure that you're in the left and right layer, meaning the main house output or layer, and then you can bring it up into the main house. When you connect or disconnect the device, make sure the gain is down, and then disconnect the device.
Okay.
Otherwise, you might get pops and damage the speakers. Next, we're going to cover playing a DVD. First, you need to power the projector and drop the screen. You do that by holding this button for 2 seconds and then letting go. That will lower the screen and also power the projector. To play a DVD, we went over powering up by holding this for 2 seconds. Next, you open up the DVD player. It's this device, the Blu-ray 201. Place your DVD into the unit, and it will load and start with the menu if it's configured that way. If you've noticed on the main screen, you're seeing what's on the Mac right now. The reason being is that the input for the projector is set for PC. In order to see what's on the DVD, you need to select DVD. And it will sync up, and now as you can see, what's on the projector is what's coming from the DVD player. But if you notice, you don't hear anything yet. In order to get audio for your DVD, make sure you're on the main layer, you're in left and right, bring up the DVD faders, and they're paired together. And that's it. And you notice it's gained fairly well. And also, the subwoofers are already preset too. To stop your DVD, you can bring down the faders to turn off the volume. Eject the DVD. Close it back up. And to power down the projector, hold the display power for 2 seconds. And it will turn off the projector. So say you wanted to play a YouTube video, or for instance I have Pandora brought up here, and play that through the house system. Make sure that the volume is set up high and that the music is playing, and you'll be able to verify that by coming to the board, making sure you're on this layer and the left and right house layer. Go to the Mac left and right and bring up the volume. And it's pre-gamed, so you should be okay.
This is if you have a problem.
This is an example of one problem you may have in terms of audio coming out of the Mac. Say you set up your video or Pandora or iTunes or whatever, and you're playing it and you hear music, but if you go over to the board, you don't see any signals lit, nor when you select the channel do you see anything in terms of the volume or meter there. And you can bring up the fader, and you don't want to, please never do this. Something's broke, and so I'm going to push it all the way up. You don't need to have it all the way up. You only need it up a little bit, and then bring it down and try to troubleshoot what's going on. So in this case, the Mac has several audio devices associated with it. You hear the music, so you say, well, it's coming through the internal speakers. Go to the System Preferences icon, double-click on Sound, select Fast Track Pro USB. And then just close that. And make sure it is still playing. Once you've done that, you should be successful and start to see the signal here. You're able to bring up the faders. Don't have the faders up here because it will be very loud. You only need it up a little bit if you actually want to try fixing it and then verifying that it works.
Okay.
This M Audio box has the USB interface to the Mac and the feeds to the QU mixing board. So that's where the mixing board is getting its audio feed from the Mac, and that's how you get it into the house system. When you power off the system, make sure you power off the speaker amplifiers first, because that's the last in the chain. If you do it last and you power off the mixer, you might get unwanted pops and damage the speakers. So the first thing you want to do when you power off is to power off the amplifiers with these two switches. Next in the sequence is the master power here. It's marked with a 1. So that's the second thing you turn off. It will turn off everything else, including the mixer, the rack, and the wireless units, and the audio processor.
Okay.